You are in Dental Academy USA. My name is Leo Kirish. If this happens to be your first video that you're watching, I highly recommend you to go through my channel. I have several videos. Many of them are in Portuguese. I'm translating one by one into English. And you can learn a lot about how to become a dentist in the United States. I bring topics in these videos, and today's conversation is going to be about your background and how can you prove stuff that you have done in the past. It's a very interesting question that I received from a lot of people. I only bring questions that I received from a lot of people to these videos here, of course, because that's what people wanted to hear about. I basically have my thoughts about how you're going to be doing stuff, or how you're going to be putting stuff on your resume, in your curriculum, on your application. If you have been following me for a long time, you know what's going to come next, right? What's going to come next is that I'm going to ask you to click in the link down below, subscribe, set up the notifications, leave a comment, like the video, share with your friends so I can continue to bring more interesting content here to you for free. All right after this, we're going to dive into the daily question. So people come to me and they're like, Leo, how can I prove these things? I've done this a long time ago, or I've done this, it wasn't that long ago, but I don't have my supervisor's contact information. Was this random person? Or maybe they say, I've done this just for one day and they never give a certificate. How can I prove that I've done all these things? Well, this is your lucky day, because the answer is you don't have to prove. You don't have to prove that you have done everything. You don't need a certificate for everything. I like to say that the application is in good faith. You do things in good faith. You put things out there in your application in good faith. And people who will receive your application are basically going to, be like, okay, oh, this person did these things. With that being said, if you try to come up with something that you didn't really do, people are going to be able to spot that. It's very easy. Keep in mind that these people interviewing candidates, they've been doing this for a long time. They interview multiple candidates. They're very seasoned. They can spot things that are not true from 2 miles away. Okay? So even though you don't have to prove stuff, you have to be very mindful about what you put in your application, okay? I usually say that the only things that you have to prove is that you took the exams, which you have to send the result of the exams, and that you've done dental school, which comes through the ECE or WES translation forms that you get that. Those are the things that you have to prove. But if you've done some volunteer work 3 years ago somewhere, you don't have to have a certificate for that. You can put that in your resume, on your curriculum, in your CAAPID or past application. You can do that. Now, my recommendation, my rule of thumb, this is Leo's recommendation. So people are like, oh, should I put everything that I've done in my life there? I would be careful about that. Why is that? If you've done something where you don't remember anything about that, whether because it was a long time ago, or whether it's because, you didn't do that great of a job, so you didn't get much involved in a project or whatever, my recommendation would be to leave these things out of your application. All right? Why is that? Because if by whatever reason you're doing an interview and somebody comes to you and asks you a question about that event in your life, and your answer is like, oh man, that's so long ago, I don't even remember. Or, you know what, I wasn't very involved on that and I don't remember the details. That just doesn't sound good. It just doesn't sound good. So even though you don't have to prove with a certificate, if somebody asks you a question about something that you've done and you don't know how to talk about that, that's not good for your application. That just sounds like you're lying. Or you may not be lying, but it sounds like you're making something look bigger than what really is, Let's say, just an example here, you put out there that you were the head person in organizing an event, and then they ask you about what you did in this event, and you're like, well, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. Well, you said here that you have to organize, you're the head of the organization, you cannot talk about what you did in the event. That's not good, So I would say make sure definitely you put stuff that you've done in your resume, of course, but if you cannot talk about something in details, that's usually something that either was unimportant to you or happened a long time ago, that I would say, might want to leave that out, and focus on the more important things. It's not about something that you did that was big or small. It's about how much you can talk about that. I've done stuff back in the day, a long time ago. I applied a long time ago. I got accepted to school in 2014. That's when I got accepted. When I was in middle school, I helped organizing events. I wasn't the head of organization or anything like that. I was basically the guy running errands. You know, when people asked me to do stuff, I was doing stuff. And it wasn't something major, it was something small. But that wasn't my resume, that wasn't my application. Now, if anybody ever asked me any of these questions, I'll be able to talk back and forth what I did. Everything, I'll be able to give you to the detail what I did, because I put a ton of effort into it. Even though it was a small role, a small amount of time, I put effort into it. And even today, I can tell you that I was the director of the room. I would greet the speakers. I would provide the speakers with the laser to point stuff. I would set up their computers. I would make sure they're on time. I would make sure they finish on time. I would make sure that they know when it's about 2 minutes for them to be over, because I had to sign there, hey, 2 minutes and you're up, you know. So I can talk about that even today, you know, and that happened, I guess, 12, 20 years ago almost, you know. So if you can talk about something because you know all the details about what you've done, certainly you should add that to your resume. But if you cannot talk with confidence about something that you've done in the past, that I'll probably leave out of my application and focus on the more important things. But to answer your question, you don't have to have a certificate for everything that you have done. You do not need that. You know, in the same note, some people take a lot of CE, continuing education courses, and they may or may not have the certificate, but there's not even a place for you to upload the certificates. But let's say you put a bunch of CE courses that you took and somebody asks you questions about these CE courses, and you're like, oh, I don't remember. I don't know what I learned in this course. I mean, that just doesn't sound good, you know? People ask me a lot, should I put my CE course? I'm like, you should certainly put CE courses, but can you talk about that? Can you talk about what you learned on them? You know, can you discuss that when the question comes up? If you can, sure, go ahead and do it. But if you cannot, you might just want to leave that part out. That's my recommendation. If you like the video, go ahead, click the link down below, subscribe, share with your friends, leave a comment, and I'll bring more videos to you. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.